Good morning, everybody. Is it morning? Yes, so we've just entered afternoon. So, welcome everybody to the colloquy on the physical to virtual future coordinates of school. I have with me some amazing educators who are here in the field of education, both by profession and passion. So it's really interesting to have all the passionate folks here. So I would formally introduce you to Dr.Snehal Pinto, Director of Ryan International Group of Institutions. So Dr. Snehal Pinto is an educator with an experience of over 20 years in various capacities, including teaching and leadership. As a results-driven leader, she has made a significant contribution in enhancing teaching and learning processes in order to develop effective student engagement across the country. So a very warm welcome to you, Dr. Snehal Pinto. So we also have with us Dr.Ashwini Kulkarni, Founder, Director of IICMR City Bright Schools. So Dr. Ashwini is a doctorate in school education and a postgraduate degree holder in management sciences. By training, she is an engineer. She has worked with various university committees on state and national level. Dr. Kulkarni has played an active role in establishing and nurturing the City Bright Group of Schools in Pune. A very warm welcome to you, Dr. Ashwini Kulkarni. We also have with us Ms.Deepa Bushan, Director of Schools at CP Goenka International Schools, Mumbai. Dr. Deepa Bushan is a passionate educator with over 2 decades of expertise in education, and she has been working in the business management side of schools, curriculum design and implementation, coaching and mentoring of school leaders, school leadership team, as well as professional development of every stakeholder within the school. She's also recognized as India's top 100 great people managers in 2021 by Forbes India. A very warm welcome to you, Ms. Deepa Bushan. And finally, we have Ms.Anushree Gandhi, Associate Vice President of Education Strategy at the Lodha Group. Ms.Anushree Gandhi is an engineer by education, but an educationist by passion and profession. She founded I Explore Education Consulting to mentor and guide students to help them make appropriate career choices. Earlier, she has worked with Exceed Education and manages the Lodha Education portfolio of 6 K-12 schools and 1 Institute of Teacher Education in India. So a very warm welcome to you, Ms. Anushree Gandhi. So as we move into looking into the future, let's acknowledge the 3 disruptors that Ms. Asha Narayanan also spoke about. So one was globalization that we all know was a silent disruptor. Then we had the whole idea of bringing an international curriculum, all thanks to globalization. So that was one of the disruptors that we had. And then we had technology that fascinated us and took us in directions where we had smart boards and everything technology. Right? So this was another disruptor that we had, and pandemic, the bang disruptor that has changed the way we look at things as we move forward. Now, before we start this discussion, I have a question to all of you. Should we make schools obsolete as they are?
Should we, or will it become obsolete?
Will it is the other question. So the question is, we all have been students at some point in time. We have all been a part and parcel of the system that's been there for so long. So the question is, should we make schools obsolete as they are as educators and shape something that can inspire generations to come, right? So a lot of us, like those of us who have been advocating for change in the way education happens, not just in the country but in the world, we all have been asking for that change, and I think pandemic was something that accelerated that. And it has shown us the possibilities that we never thought we had, right? So who could have thought that a student here in India could interact with somebody more intimately in some other part of the world, or for that matter, have exchanges? So looking at all of this, the question is like, can we move ahead and shape the future by acknowledging the flaws in the system that we have, by acknowledging the challenges that we have faced, and by celebrating the achievements that we've made over the last few years. Another question that comes to our mind when we talk about pandemic, technology, and all of this is, will the whole new thing that has come up, Web3 or Ed3, will it be a disruptor? Or it's just going to be any other technology that might not make the kind of difference that we're all anticipating. So I'm going to have this conversation with all of you. I know that envisioning future can be a bit of a daunting task. We don't know what the future holds. But let's try to learn from the lessons that we've had during the pandemic, learn from the positive experiences, the flaws that we identified during the pandemic to shape the future of education. So I would like to take this moment to ask my panelists to make their initial remarks. So Dr. Snehal Pinto.
Firstly, good morning, and now good afternoon to each one of you. It is my honor to be here. Congratulations to the Lodha Institute as well as Karadi Patels. Thank you for having me. I want to thank God for this opportunity, my Savior and my Christ. And just being the first to go is a huge, yeah, Kanak is laughing. It's this huge pressure because how do you come off from all that we have heard? But there's something that struck me about what Mr. Sainath spoke. He spoke about stories. He spoke about the oral tradition that was always there in our culture. And stories keep testimonies alive. It keeps traditions alive. And while we have gone through seasons of disruption, look around, and this is what is worth celebrating. That we are still here, that we are still going to forge ahead, that we are still going to ensure that learning is relevant, is meaningful, and schools are not obsolete, but we are who are going to shape the future alongside the citizens. And who are these citizens? The ones that come through our corridors, the children. Except our roles have evolved. And the way I see the learnings of the pandemic to take into the future and what future schooling and what future learning would look like is, one, our roles would have changed as educators. We are no longer a sage on the stage or guide by the side. We are now, I read this in the OECD report, we are now the meddler in the middle. We are the ones who are going to be taking on the role of facilitating and constructing knowledge alongside the kids, in co-creating knowledge. Does that mean we will have to upgrade ourselves? That is a requisite. If we want to be relevant in the future, that is the first step. So yes, our roles are going to change as educators. Also, the way we do assessments are going to change. We have seen in the digital, in the virtual teaching and learning realm, that flexibility of learning spaces came forth. So, of course, our kids are still trying to find their way around what is flexible learning space and comfort zones. But we actually saw the possibility of this happening. That brought into question that will learning spaces change? Of course they will. The way we have our brick and mortar schools designed, that's going to undergo change. Large spaces, collaborative spaces where children can work in teams, where flexible seating for children to do their own work also brings forth then student agency and ownership of their own learning. There will come a time where students will not have to go through all the gamut of subjects, but they will choose what they want to learn, what is relevant to what their interests are, what they feel like pursuing, even as a vocation in the future. And those, while the literacy, numeracy basics and fundamentals and essentials are going to be in place, it will be more personalized, not bespoke, personalized. It will be more customized to their needs, their interests. So what does that mean? That means the learner is the center, right? And that also then helps us as educators to know that we don't just need to upgrade our skills, we also need to create space to learn along and co-create. And I think that, to me, brings again the question of assessments. What is the use of assessments now, and what they're going to evolve to be? I see a more evidence-based, more project-based learning taking place. That is how I envision the future educational process, to entail. As well as, I think, in terms of the adaptive learning. I think for us as schools, AI has already taken into account, has taken over and automated a lot of our systems. And I heard Dr. Pant not very long ago speak at a conference, and he said, if teachers continue the way they are teaching now, they will be easily replaced by technology. They can be easily replaced. And he said that throwing all caution to the wind. When you hear a man of stature speak that, then you know it's time to sit up and take note. And which then brings into focus teacher training, teacher education, as well as lifelong learning. The whole idea of lifelong learning became not just a buzzword, but became a reality for us. You see 4 generations at the workplace now. And it is here where we have to ensure that every generation is just as relevant to the learner. And how does that happen? The onus is on us then to ensure that we take ownership of the skills that we want them to nurture, we want them to emulate. This generation is fearless. The Zillennials are fearless. They are vocal. They're more activist in nature. And if they get a cause, they will go with the cause. It has to be larger than them. And that is something we can learn. We wouldn't have the issue of global warming if we got it right while we were learning and growing. But we see the Zillennials have got it, and they want to do something about it. It's our time now to scaffold their efforts, to facilitate their efforts, and then build the world that we want them to live in, transform it one life at a time. So that's my take on what the future and my learnings from the past.
Thank you so much for your initial remarks.
Thank you.
Dr. Snehal. Dr. Anushree.
Good afternoon, everyone. Many congratulations to Kardipat for this wonderful 2 days. After a lot of disruption, as Aryan said, we really needed this and really enjoyed it. From last 2 days, we have been hearing about what exactly is what we are talking about technology and how it is going to take us further ahead. I believe that the change, the acceleration of change is really, really too much now. So when we talk about 20 years ahead, I think there are a lot of things that may change, which we may not be able to actually, foresightedness also may not be able to tell us what exactly is going to happen. But I believe I want to take a different look at it. I believe that we are talking about a lot of individualistic learning. We are talking about a lot of choices to be given to the students. We are also talking about a lot of technology availability everywhere around us. But at the same time, there is another, on the other hand, we need to look at the countries like us, which are developing countries, and we need to understand that the best use of technology certainly happens in a developing country, where there is a huge percolation that happens to the downmost strata of society. Because if we have internet everywhere, that certainly would be a reality in maybe 20 years down the line. And that time, we are going to have internet everywhere, wherever we see it, at a very low cost. So how are we looking at the downmost strata? As the keynote speaker told us that we do not have mobile phones, and especially with girls. So I think that situation needs to change, and I think it would come at low cost. So I believe technology could make it happen to us. And because of that, the other thing that is going to happen is that a change would become easier. So it would be more it would percolate to the downmost strata. It would bring both the societies quite together. We are talking about diversity now, and we are talking about diversity. Yesterday also the keynote speaker told us about there was diversity in an international school as well in Bombay, and there is diversity in an Gurukul system also, where she said that the diversity was of different nature. So there maybe the people interacted internationally, children interacted internationally. When it was Gurukul, it was more children coming from different backgrounds. So that is also a different type of diversity that we should look at. I believe the schools that we are looking at now, 20 years ahead of time, I believe would be somewhere we are, look at a school where we do not have classrooms. We would have learning spaces only, because classrooms now the world is the classroom. So you will have children sitting on the seashore, children could be sitting in a jungle or a mountain and sitting together and studying. So classrooms may not be required. There could be a lot of learning spaces where you need to express yourself. It could be maybe a dance room or any performing art room. It could be sports would gain a lot of importance, because something that our bodily needs, where you have to have fitness. So I believe that would certainly gain a lot of importance. Entertainment, where physical participation is required, would gain a lot of importance. So we need to create such schools where all these facilities are certainly available. I also believe that we need a huge library, because library is something where you have creative imagination. When you see a film, I think everything comes to you directly, which is already what the director thinks of it, and you just visualize it. But when you read a book, you create a kind of a platform to see that. So I think libraries are very much in need. And with all this that is there in the school, I believe certainly the pedagogy is going to change. The curriculum needs to go into that kind of transformation, because I believe that the assessment also would change. Because when you are talking about assessments of students who are learning through these mediums, I believe you cannot have them through a classroom kind of a training that they are going to learn. That may not happen. I believe history, like for that matter, if you want to teach history to students, they should take a round of Babri Masjid when the riots were happening. That is possible with augmented reality, for sure. Or maybe they could travel to French Revolution, because that could be created. And they could participate also. It is not only VR, it could be AR, but by then they could be a participant of that thing happening alive in front of them. After that, what happens? When they walk through those kind of things, so it would be a walkthrough to history, timelines. They could also have a future walkthrough of what could be the world maybe after 5-6 years. That could also happen with technology. So I think these are the things that we should look at in schools now. It is something where technology doesn't come by accident, which happened in last 2 years. It was an accident, right? So we only reacted. And it was only a very, very small part of technology that we saw, and we criticized a lot about that, right? This was not the way that students learn. I believe the governments in the beginning said that you cannot teach students online at the lower classes. It was a ban in Maharashtra. There was a circular which came that you are not allowed to teach the students below grade 2. I think everyone here would agree. And it was, and by the end of it, if you do not teach, online to certain students, we would not allow you to do that. So I think there was a shift change for government also. So, but we only reacted, and that is why we made a lot of mistakes. Obviously, there was an accelerated understanding that change is coming. We were talking about our teachers, and we all know they could cope up with that kind of situation, and they could change. So change management was something that we learned more than anything, I believe. That change management is possible in schools. Teachers at the age of 55 learned using computer, learned synchronous and asynchronous way of teaching, but that is not technology according to me. We are talking about metaverse, we are talking about AR, we are talking about VR, and when we talk about all this, that is technology, and which could be used very well. Now all this that I am talking about is only for middle school and above. I strongly believe that for the lower classes, that is maybe kindergarten to grade 4, the schools that we have today create memories and experiences. It cannot change, it should not change. Rather, now we will have to work towards reversing the acceleration of change and maybe moving towards technology. We will have to work towards that. Now we are working towards how to use technology. Maybe 20 years down the line, we will have to tell them how not to use technology at lower classes. We will have to tell teachers that without using an PPT presentation and asynchronous mode of videos, you should be able to teach in the class. And that would be very, very important, because that maybe somewhere, bring in memories. As yesterday we heard from the speaker that my memories of my school were not related to only the classroom experience, but so many things happening around me. And that is very important for childhood memories to create, because that will automatically build in culture, because culture comes from home. Culture comes from primary schools. Mother tongues builds culture, as we just heard. So all this, how can we compromise with technology? That is not going to happen, and it is not required that we should bring in technology at lower classes. We need mentors, we need teachers to teach, and then slowly children become learners. So we have to have that transition which comes like a feather on our body, not like a landslide, that is coming on us and we do not know what to do now next, right? So I don't think that is required. So I believe the classes in primary and pre-primary should remain the way they are. Obviously there would be transformation. You can make it more interesting with technology. The walls could every day change because of AR and VR, and they could change into something that you want to teach them today. It could be a beach, it could be a night, a starry night, and that could happen very easily, that is possible. So I believe that that is the change that is required at lower level. In higher level though, we need a lot of change.
I think
further to that, I still have to make a small point here, this thing. I believe further to that, we are talking a lot about clusters now in NEP. So when we talk about clusters, we are talking only about school clusters. I don't think that would work, because school is not an island. It is a part of society, and the society has to respond to the needs of school and learners. So I believe when we talk about a cluster, the cluster should be of corporates, it should be of NGOs, which are in that school community. There should be schools of different levels. Maybe it could be an elite school, it could be a school which is coming from a tribal area. There could be people who are talking about change management in technological world. There could be people who could do internships in industries. And I believe all of that together make a cluster of school. And that is what NEP should recognize. Because if you have such clusters, I believe there will be a lot of things that there cannot be the compartmental kind of education that would exist later. Because while you are teaching, while you are learning, everything has to mix with each other. The skill labs that we are talking about, how the skill labs would work when you, so I believe that this is what we will have to look at and work forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a very interesting perspective about how, so the whole idea of focus on pedagogy, like, with or without technology, I think that was a very interesting perspective. So I would request Ms.Deepa Bushan to make her initial remarks.
Thank you, Aryan. Good afternoon to everyone. I'd like to thank the Karadi Path team as well as Lodha Institute of Teacher Education for having us here. Well, when Aryan spoke to me about, talking about the schools of future, so he spoke about 2040 and, where would we be and how would we take the learnings that we got right now. I just said, what is it that I can speak about? I don't know. I mean, as a generation, and I think most of us in this room, and I'll give you a small example, went through the disruption of the telephone. We started with that, the one where with the dial-up kind of phone to where we are currently, where you don't even need to press the buttons. And none of us, I think, remember numbers to the extent we did earlier. So if we've gone through that kind of disruption and we've reached here, we've been talking about a lot of disruption in every aspect of life. We spoke about it in education also, but nothing happened till 2 years back. Yeah, we were still, technology in education or any aspect when we spoke about personalized learning, differentiated learning, individual needs, all these spaces that we looked at, we were talking about all these things, but totally not seeing it in the classrooms on scale. We saw pockets of change, but we didn't see it across everywhere. So that got me thinking that when we're looking at 2040, what are we thinking about? In 2 years, we managed to bring in disruption in education. So Aryan told me this disruption was actually an enabler. It truly was for education, not for the other areas. We had loss of life that happened, so we wouldn't want disruption to happen in this manner. But yes, for education, I think this space opened up great opportunities. And we saw change happening, and we knew that there could be change in the field of education. So when we're looking at 2040, and I'm saying the next 20 years, if 2 years brought in this kind of disruption, I'm expecting a lot of disruption in the next 20 years. So what we hold true today, like Sir said earlier, you know, truth is objective, it's a version of what we want to see. I don't know what the truth is going to be. Is the fifth dimension going to be there? Are we going to actually be, you know, when we used to have the dial-up phone, we used to say, one day is going to come when you're going to see yourself in a phone and you'll be able to see the person. Today we're video calling all the time and across countries. There are no boundaries today. Did we think about this so many years back, 30 years back? We didn't. But this happened in the last 10 years. I don't know what kind of disruption is going to come up in the next 20 years. Are we equipped for it? Are we teaching children about it? And just imagine the kids who are coming in 2040 to you. I hope we're still alive and 100 years old as we saw with the freedom fighters. I don't know about that. But if that's going to happen, you're going to be getting kids ready for 2070, 2080. Do any of you even know what's going to happen at that time? Are we going to be like Star Trek? I'd like to go like Spock into that chamber and say, zoom, I've reached another planet and I'm there. Have we even thought about that? Are we getting kids ready for that? We're working in small, small steps. But I think where we need to reach, and for that, as educators, we need disruption within ourselves. And we need to think in a different manner completely. If we're able to do that, I think education will benefit. We're all thinkers, we're all researchers, and I think that's an attitude we need to take back to all our schools, and then we'll have schools of the future and build it in our children. So resilience, ready for change, persistence, grit, I believe is what we need to teach children for the future, and that's when change will come in, I think, and then they'll be ready for anything and everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your remarks. Ms.Anushree.
Yes, thank you, Aryan. A very good afternoon to all the thought leaders and the educators present here. It was wonderful listening to all my co-panelists here, and I have big shoes to fill, but I promise, Aryan, I'll be within the 3 minutes that have been allotted to me. So it's an absolute privilege to be a part of this panel, right? I'm probably the youngest of the lot, but I'm really happy to contribute my 2 cents in ideating the best approach that we can take as school leaders, you know, in raising our young learners today and in the coming future. We were here to debate, you know, whether physical or virtual, you know, what actually are the future coordinates going to be for our schools. So I strongly believe that, you know, the best way to predict the future is to create it and invent it today, right? That's what it's going to look like in the future. So I have a 4.5-year toddler at home, and in this whole journey of reinventing education, he's more often my source of inspiration and ignition. And so when we are today trying to, you know, define and bucket our educational systems, there's an analogy that I would like to draw from one of my, you know, one of the many banters that I keep having with him. So one evening, you know, when I walked home, my toddler was playing with these Lego kits, you know, not the big building blocks, but these small, tiny pieces of Lego. And he was trying to create something. I'm not sure how much he was trying to create, but he was more engrossed in trying to sniff it and taste it. You know, so as a mother, you know, when you become a mother, you're able to smell and sense danger even from 20 feet away. So I could quickly visualize an impending accident which was about to happen, you know, with one of the pieces getting lodged in some of the crevices of his face. So I was very proactive. I cautioned him, about it, by very patiently explaining to him that, what the consequences would be if something like this had to happen, if one of the pieces had to get lodged in his nose or in his throat. So he very patiently listened to me, and he got me to believe that he's heard me. But within a whisker of a second, he went back to his antiques. So now I had to be a little more innovative, So what I did now, I indulged in a little bit of storytelling. So I told him a story of how when his mother was his age, a similar kind of an incident had happened, and she had happened to lodge a small pearl ball in her nose, and how it ended up into becoming a hospital emergency and so on and so forth. I ensured that I was very elaborate. I also included a little dramatic effect so that I ensured that he was, the impact was long lasting. Well, this time the engagement levels were much higher, and I did get him pondering for a few minutes about it, but not for long, right? And he went back to his fidgety explorations. Now, having exhausted my, attempts, I simply let him be, just keeping my fingers crossed that, I hope that there were no eventful happenings that evening. But in not more than 10 minutes, he came running to me, with fear in his eyes, and in all exasperation trying to tell me that he'd gotten something up his nose. Fortunately, it was not too high up in his nostril, and I was able to pull it out with my bare fingers. As much as you all would have been relieved to know that all's well that ends well, but that's not really the climax of my story. So the real climax was after this incident. My toddler promptly went, put away all these Lego pieces quietly without saying a word, and ever since I've never seen him fidget with any of his toys near his nose or, bringing them anywhere close to his mouth. So the analogy that I'm really trying to make here is that the first attempt that I made, in terms of explaining or advising him is somewhat cognizant to our conventional education system, which probably my generation or the older generation experienced back in school. This is where the teachers focused on theoretical instructions, explanations, which we mere mortals were just left to digest without even giving out a burp. And I would not say that there was no learning. There was learning, but it never got registered in a manner that would lead to an application-related outcome. The second innovative attempt that I made, is probably comparable to the educational system that we are in today, with the multitude of anecdotal experiences that are available to us through the World Wide Web, making information and content far more engaging. So here the learning definitely is much more engaging, which is allowing us to absorb it into our system, but still it is not provocative enough to be acted upon, thus leaving it to be sedentary. So now if we want to raise our learners for 2040 that are not just learning but who are digesting and then ruminating it to be able to applying it in any situation, without doubt this is possible only through self-experience. When I say this, I pretty well know that each one of us sitting here is not oblivious to the fact that by far this is the best approach to learning. Yet, every teacher sitting right here, just like the worried parent that I was, instinctively always makes the first attempt at instructing, advising and explaining. I won't blame you, I think it's just the DNA. So what are the future coordinates of an ideal school which is able to keep their teachers in their best elements and at the same time ensure an environment which is inducing relevant experiences for their learners all the time? What is the answer? Is it physical? Is it virtual? Well, I think the best bet is to say both, right? But when I say both, I'm not meaning hybrid. What I mean is flipping the classroom. Use technology to propagate and build the much required theoretical structure, which the learner can very easily access from the comforts of their home. And on the other hand, build exhilarating experiences for the learners at the school to ensure that the learning is engraved for life and leads to an outcome. Just, we can expose the learner to concepts of velocity, friction, force, acceleration through all these engaging anecdotal content and information which is available online. And the next day, actually do a bicycle race. let them experience it themselves. While they've understood the concepts at home through technology, the school is out there to get them to experience it. You know, while we would want to preach these values of empathy and sensitivity through all the sensational videos available online, again, a day spent volunteering at an orphanage will allow you to see how these values can transform into virtues. So I would simply like to conclude by saying that the debate is never between a physical or a virtual. It's never whether, you know, learning is within the school or the learning is outside of the school, but it is always about coexistence. And a flipped classroom has the potential to do just that. On one hand, we can leverage all the Baijus and the Khan academies of the world, which have a plethora of structured content. And on the other hand, the schools will continue to serve their core purpose, a purpose of being able to liberate young minds through a commonality of culture, but at the same time encouraging individualism through human experiences. I would just like to leave you all with a very intriguing thought. You know, Ms. Pinto was also mentioning this. Technology will not replace great teachers. This is something which I very profoundly believe myself as well. Technology will not replace great teachers, but technology in the hands of great teachers can be absolutely transformational. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your remarks. So now, looking at the conversation that we've had with all of you, one of the things that I could take away from this discussion primarily is that the future of education or the future school coordinates would not be in technology or based on technology, but rather than that on pedagogy. So I think this is a very powerful message to drive from this discussion, to look beyond the noise of technology. So I think one of the challenges for us as we move into shaping the schools of the future is also to see how we can address the threats that technologies pose. A very interesting example was of library, like, you know, to have a library that Ms. Anushree was talking about. Ms. Ashwini was talking about. So the idea of, like, you know, leveraging these technologies for creative imagination and to unleash the potential in a child rather than make it easy. So I think the schools of the future should prepare kids to move beyond the bubble that we create within the school and prepare them for real life outside. So one of the thoughts that came to my mind when Dr. Snehal was talking about fundamental skills. So I think one of the skills of the future that could make a difference is skills like social emotional learning. So that could be made into like a foundational skill within the framework of literacy, numeracy, reading, writing, and all of these skills. So I think this was a very interesting point of view. And also talking about digital poverty and digital divide, I have a question for all of you in the audience. What comes to your mind when I say technology? What kind of things come to your mind? Can we have a couple of people, like, you know, share what comes to their mind immediately when I say the word technology? Anyone?
See technology just as an aid, not a substitute for the humans.
Okay, what kind of things come to your mind? Like physical things that come to your mind when we say technology? Oculus, lovely. So when you look at technology, we look at technology as something that is to do with digital. I think that is also one point we can reflect to relook, because the chalk and the whiteboard or marker that you have, that is also technology. So when you look at digital poverty, digital divide, and you shape the kind of classrooms you have, technology could mean anything that comes to your aid, like the madam out there was talking about. So I think this was a very interesting, eye-opening conversation that we've had with all of you. So what we would do right now is have a few questions for all of you, and I keep a timer of exactly 1.5 minutes to respond. I know this is this is a challenging task, but one of the things that I want to ask is a few questions as you shape the future of education. What are the skills that our kids need today that could shape the future tomorrow? Because I know we have not seen the future. We don't know what tomorrow holds. So what are these skills that we need today that can shape the future schools as well as the future? Something that's very relevant. Anyone can take
Anyone
this.
can answer? You'll take it? Well, I'll take part of it. I think one of the first things we learned through this past season was adaptability and being an agile learner. If you're not quick to change, you will wane into oblivion. And to be relevant is essential to all of us as educators, and that is why I would definitely put forth adaptability and agility as one of the foremost skills, apart from all the 21st century skills. And I think we've seen microcosms of it in the classroom, and not necessarily physical classroom, but in the whole process of the last 2 years. We've seen that happening when we got our kids to do projects. But now the difference is it was more teacher directed, where we got our kids to do project, but I see more of student agency into action, where the ATL, the approaches to teaching learning, is going to find its way into just evolving in the classroom. And for that, I think collaboration, critical thinking, problem solving is going to be the big thing, where they create something new out of all the learnings. So I think that, to me, are some of the skills.
I could not agree more with
Okay.
you on that. So I think one of the skills, one of the most sought after skills in corporates is working in an ambiguous environment or working with ambiguity. So I think it's a very interesting skill to have adaptability and agility as we move forward. Another question is, when you look at the top 10 skills as advocated by World Economic Forum, you'd see that 7 to 9 of those skills fall in an ambit that has nothing to do with technology or technical skills. So most of these skills that you see are social emotional learning skills. So how relevant do you think these kind of skills would be in the future, given that we have an onslaught of new technologies that we are afraid that would replace a lot of things that we are doing, whether it is AI or other emerging technologies. So who would like to go?
Yeah, sure. So, well, when we came back to schools even now, what we saw was connections, human connections, were the most important aspect. So when we spoke about social and the emotional aspects, the learning happened, but what we looked at was the learning that we required was very different. It was more social, more emotional. We had to go back to the basics, which we never thought we need to teach anybody. So when children, I'm sure you would have seen that with your children also, when a group of children are sitting together, you don't see them talking to each other and interacting with each other anymore. So what you're actually teaching them are basics like connecting, and can you speak with each other rather than be on your device? We actually now are going back to the basics. We never thought these were the skill sets or values that we needed to teach kids. Today, I think technology is an enabler to a great extent, but teaching children that how do you let technology be is a skill. How do you let it not control you is a skill. How do you make life real for yourself and not only live in that world on that screen or in that filter or in that social media? That's a skill today that we need to teach children. So content, yes, your math, science, all these elements are still there, but what we really need to focus on are the basics. So connections, human connections, I think come to the fore, and any skills related to that are what we're looking at.
Thank you so much. Now when we talk about the future of education in India, or Education 2040 in India, so one of the things that comes to our mind is the NEP, the impact of NEP on this. So what do you think is the biggest strength that NEP offers, and my next following question, any of you can take. What is the challenge that we need to address within this as we roll it out in our schools?
See, I believe that with technology, ease of learning is going to come, and there would be a lot of time that would be saved. But that time would be fruitful and productive has to be ensured. I believe that is one biggest threat that we may have, that engaging children in a right way, in a productive way. Otherwise, it could be really destructive. We are seeing that in many of the countries, what is happening to the young people, because maturity may not come with technology. So we need to work on that. NEP talks about giving a lot of decentralized decision making that they talk about. So it is bringing in more seamless flow between the schooling and workplaces. That is what we are talking about. But I believe that one biggest thread is engagement, right engagement. So in short, I would say that work on engagement management for children.
Thank you so much. My next question, anyone would like to take the other part of the question? So what could be one of, what could be the one challenge that you see as you implement the NEP? I think that was answered.
Yeah.
So what is that one great strength that we have within NEP that we can leverage?
So I think the flexibility, I think, is the biggest strength that the NEP is bringing to the table. Flexibility in terms of the choice of subjects, the choice of language of instruction, the breaking the walls of the curriculum really with the focus more on skills and experiences. I think that is the key strength that the NEP is bringing to the table. Just mentioning, picking up from where we left yesterday with Ms. Nandita was mentioning that each child brings his own intuitive ability. And I think this flexibility is going to allow the teachers in the classroom to really foster this individual intuition ability of every child in the way that it should really be addressed. I think that will be the greatest strength.
Thank you so much. So can we say that as we reimagine education and schooling in 2040, can we say that the future of schools would be around student agency?
Just to add to the part where you said what is the strength of NEP, you got to understand this is a great aspirational document. What I was discouraged was the next year the budget was cut down by about a big chunk. For me, it is putting the money where the mouth is, and the intent is great, but we need to see implementation in the right spirit, which means equipping teacher training and teacher education. Because if you're going to handle the learners of the future, if we are not equipping ourselves, we are going to be meandering around in the woods. So yes, this is a great document. Scalability, digital divide caused a great deal of pain. You have to understand about over 60% is what was estimated by Oxfam India in the gap between the urban and the rural area learning outcomes, achievement outcomes, because they didn't have access. So while we are being futuristic, and that's great, for me, the urgent question is we have to start now, shaping the now for the future, and it has to start with us. That's why I loved what Mr. Sainath spoke. It is not just about the Anglo-Saxon view on education and all that it means. We have it within our own land to offer to the world, and it has to start with just the basics. So yeah, I'm looking forward to exploring possibilities.
Thank you so much for that. Just building on to your argument, building on to your point. So one of the things, we always say we are shaping the future of tomorrow, we are shaping leaders of tomorrow. So the question to all of you, I think we have the most empowered educational leaders out here. The question is, how can we shape leaders of tomorrow if we as schools don't give them that space to be leaders today? Because leadership is in practice, right? And the second thing is, how can we create So I believe the schools of the future, as we are moving to the final question, this is one thing that has been on my mind. How can we create democratic individuals when our entire system is autocratic? So I believe that the schools of the future are democratic spaces where students are at the center, where you take feedback not as as a routine exercise, but as something that needs to be changed and implemented. So with that, I ask a final question to all my panelists out here. What is that one thing that we need to start? What is that one thing we need to stop or rethink? And what is that one thing that we need to continue as we prepare our schools to move towards schools of 2040?
Okay,
So I think we can just go in this order.
so I think we should start on focusing. It is on. Okay. Yeah. So I believe we should start on focusing more on how to learn than what to learn is something that we should start. We should stop one-fit-all approach or maybe centralized decision making. And what we should continue obviously is hybrid mode of learning, which we have started already.
Just in view of time and the red flag staring at my
Yeah.
face, can I just say I resonate with Dr. Dr. Kulkarni? But no, but just quickly, I think one of the things that we can continue is the lifelong learning mode. Can we just all agree that we are going to be open to learning, yielded to learning, and ready to execute and implement, not just be listening and attending this amazing kind of conclaves, but actually going back with takeaways and doing something. Even if you do one thing, that's one step at a time. The one thing that I would not want to go on is I think I've changed that. I think I'd like to involve parents as partners, because teachers and students can work together, but we need parents on board as partners. If they don't buy into, please understand, the millennials as parents need to buy into your vision, and your vision is not yours. It has to be a collective shared vision with the students of the school, with the parents as well, and the community being a big part of it. So yeah, for now let's keep it.
Well, making it short, I think we just need to question what we are doing, why we're doing this, and why are we teaching what we teach. And learning can happen anywhere. So a school no longer is a school in a building, it's a school anywhere as long as learning takes place. And learning can be anything, as long as it makes you lead a better life.
Thank you.
Sure, quickly summarizing, what I feel is, we should start with flipping the classrooms, also flipping our mindsets. Stop fighting the system and learning to coexist. And of course, as educators, continuing to bring the passion that we bring towards learning and the learners into the system. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your insightful and riveting responses. Now, just before we leave, I just wanted to acknowledge all of your contributions. So I just wanted to acknowledge all the contribution that you have made and have a pat on the back. So let's give a big round of applause to all of us who have come a long way, and we are thinking about 2040. So thank you so much, and I really, really appreciate all the amazing work that all of you are doing. Thank you, take care, and stay safe.